a large portion of many First Nations in Canada. We've taken these issues, and Makasa has been leading that as the youth have from our community to the United Nations, to the Climate Change Summit, and to any other avenues that we can encourage people to get Nestle to stop extracting our waters. They did not get consent, and under UNDRIP, they are supposed to have consent. It causes a great deal of stress to our young people. I'm not sure if you're aware, but First Nations in Canada also have some of the highest suicide rates. And what we found with our young people in interviews and surveys and so forth is that climate change, but particularly water anxiety, has caused them great stress. And that's why our teams, all three of the research teams, support empowering and elevating youth, which is why I'm so happy that Makasa is joining us here today. So I'll switch over to her. Are you ready? I'm going to try to get out of this so I can fix whatever happened there. Don't want that one. Can you see it or no?
No, I can't.
Okay, let's try it again. Technology, gotta love it. How about now? Can you see it now?
Yeah, I can see it now.
Okay,
Maybe just put it in presentation mode.
I'm gonna try. There you go. Makasa,
Yeah. So,
your introduction.
maybe just put it in presentation mode. Yeah, so hi everybody. My name is Makash Licking Horse. Sega Sarguego, Makash and Getskin, Gahaga Niwa Gohanjode, Wakatuhuni, Six Nations, Nidawageno. I go to McMaster University. So what I said was, hi, my name is Makasha, which means red earth. And my last name is Looking Horse. I'm half Mohawk, Wolf Clan, and Lakota from Six Nations. I'm a student at McMaster University. I also am a whole local youth leader. And yeah, I ran a few Youth Rise events and a climate change awareness day for youth. Yeah, and that day was about having the youth there speak what they want about, speak their minds and speak to the community about their worries about our environment, so we pay more closer attention to it. And I also, yeah, led a few protests. So, yeah, so
Is this working?
It says Six Nations says no to Nestle. Yeah,
Okay.
so this protest here was the first one that I have did, and how I knew how I found out this was happening was through the program, like she had said, the water research program that's happening in Six Nations. And through that project, I learned that only 9% of our Six Nations community is hooked up to the water treatment plant, and then the rest have to basically fend for themselves of getting their own water. They have to pay for their own cistern and get water trucks coming in or fill up a big jug of water on somebody's truck and then take it and put it into their cistern. So it's kind of very unreliable source of water. And then there's also a big percentage of people on our reserve who go without any kind of running water at all. So that makes, and I've heard their stories and they're heart-wrenching. Of the households that go without running water because they can't afford it, lack of infrastructure, basically. And this is this isn't just a Six Nations ordeal, it's happening across Canada and in the US. But yeah, in Canada, um, Trudeau has not met up to his promises on making sure that First Nations people do not have, do have clean drinking water to their households. And then when I found out all of this information, I was already um very mad that this was happening to my people and to my community and the struggles that they had to go through every single day of having kids and waking up and getting them all ready for school and not having any running water, so they have to put on the stove. They have to have all of these huge trials that take hours. Whereas like people who do have running water don't have to go through those things. So, and then I found out that Nestle was taking 3.6 million liters of water from underneath our feet. And we don't even have access to clean drinking water, and we're getting the water that we do have um, pumped out from underneath our feet from a water bottling company that pays $500 in the permits and makes millions off of that water from a community who doesn't have clean drinking water. So this triggered me, and I was like, we need to make a difference. We need to do something about this, and my community needs to know. And so I held multiple meetings with the community and asking them what they wanted me to do, um, and what they wanted me to do about it. And so they wanted me to have a run, um, and then they wanted me to have a water ceremony and then a protest afterwards. So we did all of that in one day. We had and an information session in the morning. And the run was through the community, and a long time ago we used to have we used to have runs from community to community for a message as a messengers. So our message was for Nestle to stop taking our water.
To the cease and
And
desist.
yeah, and then the cease, and so that was the first protest, and then I did more work, letting the Haudenosaunee Confederacy know, and they stood behind me and said that we need to give them a cease and desist so that they get off our land and stop taking our water. And so the clan mothers helped write that up, and we had a protest in the summertime, and me and the clan mothers and I gave the um I think it was the president of the Nestle Waters, and there was all kinds of security cops and escalates, and they were thinking that we were a threat. But I was like, I'm just a youth, and grandmother's like, we cannot be a threat. We're not a threat. Just like, look at us. We're gonna hand you this paper. And so they met us halfway, and even though I was kind of super scared, but clan mothers like backed me up, and they said that this needed to happen, and they are on our land and we're not trespassing. So we handed them the cease and desist, and that was our last action. And now since they have moved, they want Nestle, the clan mothers want Nestle to pay in some shape, way, or form for taking all of the water that has been stolen from us, and handed back the that stewardship of the water bottling plant to back to Six Nations so we can govern it ourselves.
Go ahead, you can wrap up.
Yeah, so we so that's what we So that's what we want, and I guess want people to know how important water is to our people. We give thanks to it every single day, and we have teachings growing up, rites of passage that water is a part of us and we need to protect it. And it's an old spirit because it's been here for time immemorial. And so you talk to it like you would talk to it as like a person or like an old grandmother that has been here since the beginning of time. And because everything outside has a life and has a spirit, and that's including water. And water is most important. It's our number one medicine, because it's been here forever and it sustains everything on this earth, with life, including us. And it's common sense and it's part of our way of life to protect water at all costs.
Okay, I won't play this, but if somebody wants to see more of her work, it's on our website, which Mike has the um, what do you call it,
Link.
links to. Oh, it's been a long week. Just to mention to people there, like our community, we just lost. We lost a lot of elders to COVID, and a lot of them didn't have access to clean water. So its impact is incredible. And for Nestle to do what they're doing when our elders don't want them to take the water only makes us want to fight that much harder, because these people give thanks to water every day. And they're so sad to see what's happening and what settlers have done to our land and our water. And our youth are inheriting a terrible burden. So, with COVID and everything else going on, it does have an impact, as it did with the Dene and the Navajo, where our people can't wash their hands every day and wash everything down every day, and for Nestle to not even bother to give anything back to the community is just evil in our eyes. So I just want to, our community's in grieving. We've buried like 10 just in the past 2 weeks. All of them, most of them were faith keepers and knowledge holders. That knowledge is, you can't find it anywhere else in the world. So we're here because we're committed to this issue on Nestle. So thank you so much, and supporting Makasha's work and our youth to fight Nestle. We need allies all over the world. We cannot do this by ourselves. Thank you, Yahweh.
Thank you, Makasha, and thank you, Dawn. We are very sorry for your loss, and we share your sorrow. I say personally that we really appreciate working with you and with others at Six Nations, and we appreciate you sharing your teachings and your legacy and your struggle with us. We're very pleased to be proud to be your allies, and we look forward to continuing to work together. There's a link in the chat box for the podcast that Makasha leads. Is it a weekly podcast, Makasha? I can't remember. Do you do it every week?
Yeah, well, we just ended our season 3 just 2 weeks ago, but more about our podcast. It was a way to connect scientists and activists. So, and talking about water. So we have everything that relates to water on there, from astronomy to health, in Six Nations. And we have activists on there from Alaska to South Dakota to Brazil, and speakers from Amazon to New Zealand, and we and also like professors from like the United Nations University, all talking about water and their situation in their communities and how you can help them. So we have done like 27 episodes, and they're all different. They're all on different things, like I said, like astronomy to VR virtual learning, and all different kinds of different topics in relation to water. And our guests are phenomenal. So you can check that out in that link. It's on YouTube called Oneganos Let's Talk Water, or all of our episodes are on there, or you can go to our Facebook page where it's live. Usually when we start up, it's every Thursday at 7 p.m. You can tune in, and we're going to be starting season 4 soon. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. And that's on the Oneganos Water is Life page and the Oneganos Let's Talk Water.
Thank
So
you,
just, yeah, that up.
thank you, Makasa. I'm pleased now to introduce Luke and Nickie Sekera from Maine. I think it was 18 months ago, Nickie, that I drove down in the fall, and we had met online, and you were a terrific host, you and Luke, and toured us around. We met many activists in Maine because unfortunately Nestle has a lot of operations in Maine. It may be the largest in the States, I think you're going to tell us. So welcome, Nickie and Luke, and over to you.
Thank you, Mike. Hello, everybody. I'm Nickie. This is my son, Luke, and we're co-founders of Community Water Justice. We're based in the Western Mountains of Maine, which is the most northeastern state in the United States. We're in the Mount Washington Valley within the Saco River watershed on the ancestral lands of the indigenous Abenaki people. For context, Maine is about twice the land size of Switzerland, but with only a population of 1.3 million people. For many years, when Luke was very young, I did human rights advocacy work in our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., and would often have him with me while engaging in this work. When we moved to Freiburg, it wasn't very long before we became concerned with the volume of Nestle water tanker trucks that were thundering by our home 24 hours a day and 7 days per week, which made being near the road quite dangerous and stressful. Because of this, Luke and I had many questions about where the trucks were coming from, where they were going to, and what the bottling industry was doing on a regional and a global scale. Our inquiry process started us off on our learning journey on the issue of water privatization and how corporations such as Nestle have been taking advantage of our weak laws here for a position to global markets through our ports on the Atlantic Ocean. Before we learned about Nestle taking our water, the more questions would come up that needed answers. Luke learned at an early age that engaging on this issue would be an uphill battle, as we soon understood that Nestle has worked its way into our state agencies and our governor's offices. My generation and the generation before me has made many poor decisions with creating a legal infrastructure for our water privatization to exist. And it's Luke's generation and the generations that are to come who will be inheriting this harmful legacy. So unless we work together now to steer us into a better pathway forward, then that's going to be our reality. However, given this reality, I'm going to now turn this over to Luke.
Hi, everyone. So Nestle has been operating in Maine since they first bought the Poland Spring Water Company from Perrier in 1992. Though there had been previous efforts against Nestle in Maine, we started our organizing in 2012 when we learned that Nestle was trying to secure a 45-year-long contract with our town's privately owned water supplier, the Freiburg Water Company. They did this without the community's consent, and our concerns were dismissed because it was a business deal between two private companies. So, Freiburg residents challenged the contract in court in what would turn out to be a 3-year-long legal battle. The Public Utilities Commission was the government body responsible for approving this contract, and it took 1.5 years to get all of the Public Utilities Commissioners to recuse themselves from this case because each and every one of them had financial ties to Nestle. In 2016, we brought the case up to the Maine State Supreme Court, where it was determined that the Public Utilities Commission was not required to consider the environmental impact of large-scale water extraction, and we lost the case. Since then, Nestle has expanded their presence in Maine to 3 plastic bottling facilities in western Maine, and they now extract water from 10 different towns. One of these facilities in a town called Hollis is the second largest in the world, producing over 250,000 cases of plastic water bottles per day from one location alone. Nestle now extracts over 1 billion gallons per year from local aquifers in Maine, which is an amount that equals over 850 gallons per person per year from the state of Maine. Nestle has also achieved regulatory capture of our state agencies. Regulatory capture is essentially when private interests co-opt the government institutions that should be regulating them. This gives Nestle undue influence over Maine's government, so their interests come before the needs of the general public and the environment. In Maine's government, there are Nestle employees on the Board of Environmental Protection and the Maine Drinking Water Program. As I said before, Nestle also had financial ties to members of the Public Utilities Commission. Maine has become a textbook example of regulatory capture, as the government bodies that are supposed to hold companies accountable have instead become yet another tool of corporate power. Furthermore, the bottled water industry does significant harm to the environment worldwide. In 2020, Nestle was listed among the top 3 plastic polluters on the planet for the 3rd year in a row. This is mainly because of single-serve packaging. On a global scale, more than 480 billion plastic water bottles are sold each year. Most of that plastic has ended up in landfills, the ocean, and our waterways. On top of all that, the bottled water industry is dependent on the fossil fuel industry. In the United States alone, it used 76 million barrels of oil for manufacturing and distribution in a single year. As water shortages and natural disasters become more common on a global scale, we have to recognize that exploiting our most valuable resources for the sole purpose of increased profits is not the solution. We also cannot trust powerful corporations whose main motivator is profit, like Nestle, to act with our best interests at heart. Nor can we trust political leaders who work with these corporations and welcome their exploitation in the name of economic growth. They are both complicit in the destruction of our environment. Currently, there is a lawsuit against Nestle for the alleged mislabeling of Poland Spring water. This lawsuit claims that the labeling is fraudulent because it doesn't actually come from a natural spring. They instead drill a borehole nearby the spring site and mine water from deep within the ground below. Here in Freiburg, the lawsuit states that the water is actually piped into the spring and would not naturally exist otherwise. There was an earlier lawsuit against Nestle over a decade ago because the original Poland Spring for which the brand was named was pumped dry. They instead ended up settling the case out of court for $10 million in donations to charitable organizations. The $10 million that they were ordered to donate wound up as part of their public relations campaigns. Some of that money went to my school, where they used their relatively small donations for publicity. Nestle only did this to dishonestly present themselves as caring for our community and the environment, as a good neighbor. But we know that they are only in our community to pilfer our water, regardless of the long-term consequences. Water should instead be under the stewardship of the communities it sustains. Tap water uses 0.3% of the energy needed to produce bottled water, and the average cost of water access is up to 59% higher when under a private supplier than when it is under public oversight. It's the best option we have. Because of the failure of our elected leaders to avert the oncoming water crisis, young people are seizing the reins of the environmental justice movement because we are left with no other choice. We shouldn't have to be speaking about this because it should never have been an issue to begin with. Water is so fundamental to our existence that we cannot allow it to fall under the dictatorial control of corporations such as Nestle. We all need to reassess our priorities if we want to curb this crisis. We need to target the bottled water industry and other water privatizers with the same level of organizing and negative attention as we have seen against the fossil fuel industry. Because while both industries are harmful to the environment and our security, investments in water privatizing companies are still considered socially responsible. If you or anyone you know holds investments in Nestle or any bottled water company for that matter, it is only responsible to divest. Regardless of the political identities you may hold, your knowledge on the climate crisis, or your level of experience in politics, you're here because you recognize a failure in our governments and in an economic system which has placed greater value on the short-term profits than long-term security through environmental and social justice. A failure which many of our political leaders have had the knowledge and ability to fix for many years, but have not. Corporate influence on our political system has become a massive barrier to progress and a threat to our very survival. Community water justice is part of a growing alignment of young people of all abilities and identities that will dismantle the corrupt systems that are destroying our generation's right to a healthy future. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Nickie. Now, Luke and Nickie, I just want to check. Did you say that Maine is twice the size of Switzerland as a geography?
Yes, yeah, we looked that up last night just for the comparison's sake. Yeah.
So I'd like our Swiss friends to imagine this. In your country, pardon me, in Maine, there are 10 towns where there is Nestle's taking water. So in comparison, the equivalent in Switzerland would be if Nestle was taking water in 20 towns. And I wonder if our Swiss friends can imagine Nestle taking water out of the ground in 20 different places in Switzerland. In fact, I think, and I'm hoping maybe Angelina or Arvine or someone can confirm this for me, but I actually think that Switzerland kind of passed a law against water bottling, that there was a community where Nestle took water or wanted to take water, and that bottling was prevented by law. So I don't know if Arvine or Angelina can confirm that or not, but go ahead.
So I'm actually not sure, but I know that we have people on the call here that are probably able to do that. I saw that somebody from Attack is here. Maybe some other people I saw that are working on water initiatives, so maybe they can confirm that a bit better than I do. So it's an open invitation for anybody who knows more about this.
Because your country will not allow water bottling, but it is allowing Nestle to do the equivalent of take water from what would be the equivalent of 20 towns, 20 cities in your own country. So that's an example of the disparity that we're trying to we're hoping that you'll help bring to the attention of the public in Switzerland.
I think one thing that I can say that we've discussed, Mike, is that Switzerland has the best public water system in the world, or one of the best ones, yet we push in other countries for the solution to be privatization, which just it just doesn't make sense. And I think we have to keep that in mind, that that Nestle is highly involved in the development corporation, like way too much. So again, there might be people later after the discussion who can talk about this, but that's something that we should all keep in mind.
I think Nadia wants to say something. I think Nadia may be from Attack. Nadia Magnin, can you log on? I think you're muted, Nadia.
Maybe you can type it, Nadia, and we can read it out.
There she is. Oh, her mic is on now. Go ahead, Nadia. We appear to be having a technical difficulty, Nadia, so it looks like your microphone's on, but we can't hear you. So maybe you can type it in the chat box and we'll amplify it for you. In a moment, we're going to go to Angie in Colorado. And I was wondering, as Luke was speaking about regulatory capture, if that translates or not. And really, this is a process by which corporate representatives wind up in government positions and wind up regulating themselves, that they actually capture or dominate or take over the places where they're supposed to be regulated. There may be an example of that, Angelina, you can speak to as well, or pardon, to Angie. So we're going to now turn to Angie. I have just met Angie online in the last few months. Angie lives in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, and she tells me she lives in the banana belt of the Rockies, which fascinates me, even though there's snow behind her today. So as a bonus, I hope we learn about what living in the banana belt of the Rockies means. Over to you, Angie. Angie,
Sorry,
your lips. Yeah, good.
I was muted that whole time, wasn't I? Okay, let me try this again. So my name is Angie Thompson. I am representing the Central Colorado Climate Coalition, and we are partners with Unbottle Protect Chaffee County Water. So we're here in Colorado, which you can see on the map. Chaffee County is the heart of the Rocky Mountains, which is the heart of the continental divide of the United States. So a neat thing about our area is we are half desert and half high alpine, which you can see in those photos there. So we're in this unique climate called the Banana Belt because you can drive half an hour up to the mountains and go skiing and come back down into the valley the same day and go mountain biking in 60 degrees on the other side. S Mountain there you see in the photo is one of our most popular mountain biking spots. So it's really a unique place. And even though the snow behind me is deceiving, we actually are a high desert climate, which is why water is so precious here. So part of our dynamic in the Rockies is that we are the water providers, the water protectors for a good portion of the United States. The Continental Divide is the snowpack that carries all of the water that feeds the lakes and streams and rivers that go down from the highest point in our country here. Next slide, please. So in Chaffee County, a large part of our community life is based around the Arkansas River that has its headwaters here. We're known internationally for our world-class rafting, our gold medal trout fishing, and our bicycle-friendly towns. Because we are the guardians, we have a great responsibility to the downstream users you can see here following the Arkansas River that rely on this water for agriculture, drinking, and municipal use. So what is Nestle, or Nasty, the third largest polluter in the entire world, doing in our idyllic town? In short, they are taking advantage of the lack of education and legal protection that rural communities like mine have or don't have. When Nestle applied for a permit here in 2009, Chaffee County was economically depressed and struggling to find a balance between tourism and our traditional ranching life. By offering small sums of money to a struggling town and installing paid Nestle employees in county positions, Nestle was able to pressure local officials into accepting a bad deal. Next slide, please. So as if hosting a nasty international corporation isn't bad enough, our state is now losing 246 million gallons of water, or sorry, liters of water to their operation every year. This is especially bad because due to climate change, the entire Western United States has been experiencing severe drought. You can see on our national drought map there. Last year, Colorado had the 2 biggest forest fires in our state's history. Dry conditions and warmer winters have decreased our snowpack, while our warmer climate has increased the population of pine tree killing beetles. Despite this, our state's population has continued to grow and grow. Water use and water security is one of the biggest issues facing our state. Yet somehow, our county officials thought it was a good idea to grant the equivalent of 2,000 households' yearly water usage to Nestle. People from our town oppose the sale of water and ask the same question you are probably asking right now, which is who in their right mind thought this was a good idea? Yeah, well, let's talk about water in Colorado. So water is considered a public resource, but it is also a commodity that people are allowed to have ownership of in the form of water rights. So water rights are often, but not always, tied to ownership of property. So that ownership of those rights states how much you are allowed to pump and use on your land. It can come from a well, a river, a stream, or an irrigation ditch. For farmers, this law is good because it promises them a certain amount of water every year to irrigate crops. For towns, this is good because it promises water for use in urban areas. However, these laws are very unclear when it comes to commercial use. And the law states that the use must be beneficial, but leaves the interpretation of that word to the local authorities with no oversight from state or local governments. Or sorry, not local, but national governments. So here, the local authority is the ultimate authority. Next slide, please. So here's where things get weird. Due to a system in Colorado known as augmentation, companies like Nestle are able to purchase water rights from another area and send water back to the community it took water from and say their impact to a region was positive or neutral. So if you look at this map, currently Nestle takes water from a spring here at the Ruby Mountain Campground, ships it 3 hours in huge tanker trucks to Denver, and then packages them in disposable plastic bottles and then ships those bottles all over the world. Most of the Nestle Arrowhead brand water we find here is not from Colorado, but is instead from California. How insane is that? So if now for the augmentation to replace this water, we have to look at the blue line here. So over in the Frying Pan River, which is the complete other side of the continental divide, Nestle has purchased water rights from this company that controls water in that area through our local Arkansas water governing operation. So they take that water in that watershed that should go to the Colorado River, ship it through a tunnel to a reservoir north of us, then release that water down into the Arkansas River again. So as you can see, that water goes on a long journey and then completely misses the Colorado River, which is one of the most endangered rivers in the West. It is, the water rights are over allocated, which means more people who claim to have rights to the water than there is actual water in the river. So again, this seems like an insane idea, right? So why would any county official 3 to this. Next slide, please. Let's play Follow the Money. So one of the biggest problems facing Colorado is the lack of oversight in this process. The county officials are the ultimate authority, and no state or national agency is checking in with them or representing citizen interests. This has led to a number of dishonest practices in our county. First, there was the original land sale of the spring. The original landowner was paid close to $3 million by Nestle, which is a significant amount above market value. This is a plot that is unbuildable and only has this spring on it. It's about 11 acres. So in turn, this landowner happened to be a college professor, and he used his influence to actually delete parts of the official ecology report that recommended against pumping this aquifer and the problems it could cause the environment, especially during a drought. No one stopped him, partially because of the fact Nestle had installed their paid consultant in one of the government positions that oversees this process. Another public official with ties to Nestle is a member of the agency that controls water use of the Arkansas River and profits directly from Nestle purchasing water from them through the augmentation system. This member is one of 3 county officials who is making the decision to renew Nestle's permit this year. This year, we're still dealing with this. So there's also the wheeling and dealing with the neighbors. As part of Nestle pretending to be eco-friendly, they originally promised to give an important bighorn sheep habitat around the spring permanent environmental protection. However, over 10 years have passed, and instead, Nestle traded the most ecologically important part of that land that surrounds the water to a neighboring landowner who is now building a housing development. Does that seem like a benefit to wildlife? No, it's all about the money. So finally, Nestle also has given donations to our local nonprofits, especially ones that claim to protect the interests of the Arkansas River. These are the exact organizations who should be speaking out against Nestle because of the damage they do to the environment. But they have been reluctant to say anything because of fear of pressure from Nestle. This has created a lot of conflict in our community and a loss of trust in the organizations that are sworn to protect our river. Unbottle and the Climate Coalition are the only groups actively opposing Nestle's operations. Next slide, please. So Nestle has countered all of our arguments by saying they contribute significantly to our community, but it has been one lie after another. This month, they have been vying publicly for the renewal of their permit and making more promises to our community, while at the same time, they have been in the process of selling their entire North American bottling operation to 2 private equity firms. This is a collection of international investors seeking to profit from a faltering company and maximize their income. They will have no obligation to keep the community agreements Nestle is trying to put in place. So we could suffer further loss of control over our local water and resources with this deal. This year, for the first time in history, water has begun to be traded on the stock exchange like gold or steel, with investors profiting from its scarcity. This is a calculated move to start privatizing water instead of sharing it as a common resource and taking measures to make sure everyone, people, animals, and plants, have enough. Water laws in Colorado and much of the United States are so old they no longer make sense. But those who control that water today and those who specialize in the law around that water are profiting. These outdated water practices and lack of oversight are why we're calling for a moratorium, a complete stop of any water bottling permits in the United States. We need to review and improve our laws. We need to protect citizens from predatory corporations like Nestle. And right now, there are no laws that do this. Next slide, please. At the end of the day, the only real contribution Nestle has made to our community is disposable plastic bottles that pile up in our landfill and our natural hiking areas. As this cartoon from a local artist illustrates, the reality of Nestle's presence is clear. They take what they want, and plastic pollution is what they actually leave behind. As an organization committed to fighting climate change, fossil fuel use, and pollution, we couldn't be more disappointed with Nestle's behavior and complete lack of corporate responsibility. For people, for rivers, for the environment, we need Nestle to leave. Please join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. There's applause, some people clapping for you. Folks, I want to make a connection here to Vittel, France. Not sure if you're aware, but in Vittel, France, Nestle takes water, and the amount of water they take every year is equivalent to how much the aquifer has been declining for the last 25 years. So the aquifer has reached a critical level, and Nestle, in cooperation with the government, proposed they would build a pipeline from another town. And the water from the other town would go to people living in Vittel for their drinking water, and Nestle would continue to pump from the aquifer. And fortunately, as a result of advocacy by people in the community, that pipeline proposal has been stopped. When I spoke with Angie a few months ago, and she told me about the pipeline that takes water from the Colorado River to the Arkansas River, I realized that Nestle does the same thing in different communities. I don't know if this word is familiar to you in English, but Nestle has a playbook that they use in communities everywhere where it's the same. And part of that playbook, as Angie mentioned, is to go into poor rural communities and offer a little bit of money. Offer money that's a little bit for Nestle, but it's a lot for a poor community to pay for local charities, local sports associations. And I believe that Nickie told us in Maine, they actually give money to the fire department. So Nestle is essentially bribing communities with the small amount of money that they take from the profits they make on the water that they take. And they repeat this process everywhere. And one of the things we've been able to learn as communities working together against Nestle is the common factors in their playbook. Nestle, however, will deny that it's their strategy, and instead will say that their operation is very local and that Nestle headquarters in Switzerland has no responsibility for the local decision-making made by Nestle operations in Canada, Maine, Colorado, etc. When in fact, it's a strategy that's developed at the headquarters in Switzerland and delivered to communities around the world.
You're 100% right.
Go ahead, Angie.
Oh, I just said you're 100% right. Even when Nestle was in process of selling to these private equity firms, they denied it here and said, oh, we don't know anything about that. That's above my pay grade. They knew exactly what was going on.
So I want to amplify two comments, and then I'm going to bring it back to you, Angelina. So Franklin Frederick, he's based in Bern, and he's been the liaison between the Water Watchers and others to the international movement against Nestle. And We've learned a lot from Franklin, and we really appreciate his solidarity and his leadership. And he says in the chat box, the most appalling of all is that Nestle can do what they're doing in the US and Canada, wealthy countries with deeply established democratic traditions. Imagine then what Nestle could do in poorer countries with more fragile democratic institutions. And again, the point is that to protect their brand, Nestle is potentially, theoretically, leaving North America, but they're not leaving the global South. And Nadia, thank you for your comment. I'm sorry that there's been technical difficulties and you couldn't join us by speaking, but thank you for taking our case to some Swiss parliamentarians. And I see your comment about the difficulty in getting organizations to speak against Nestle's policy. But the organizations, the coalition in North America has recently written a letter to the Swiss Social Democratic and Green parties and to a number of NGOs and faith organizations asking them to become involved. So we appreciate this opportunity today. We appreciate your interest in solidarity. We especially appreciate that you've been willing and giving us the opportunity to have this conversation in English. I'm aware it's not people's first language. So thank you very much for that opportunity. We're still able to answer additional questions if you have any, but Angelina, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so the letter that, Megan, if I could have my second slide, please. So the letter that Mike just mentioned, we put that out as an open letter. So you can go ahead and sign it here, either with the QR code or with the URL that I put there. We will translate this into German, French, and Italian as well and send it out to people, but it'd be great if you already can sign it. There is my email address in case anybody wants to get in touch about work on Nestle in Switzerland. I'm happy to hear from anybody who has any ideas or resources or contacts. And there's also our Instagram, Facebook, whatever handle. They're all the same. But yeah, please feel free to go ahead and sign the open letter. And with that, yeah, we're happy to answer any questions that you have, unless maybe Irvine, you want to say something, I don't know.
We have some time to take questions, perhaps a couple of questions if anybody has any.
And while people are thinking about questions, we held an international rally, digital rally, last Thursday night. And in the chat box, you can see a link to that rally. There was about an hour-long program with speakers from all 6 communities who were affected by Nestle water taking, and as well as some performances by musicians and a couple of speeches by politicians. So you can go to that link and see that a recording there. Nadia's asking to send all the information you presented today in detail to submit. That way I'll have more concrete information to send them. This will certainly make them react, because the problem is that we in Switzerland have little information on what's happening in your community. Send me your email. Okay, Nadia, I'll send you my email in the private chat.
All right, so if there are no questions, do any of the panelists want to say anything else to close? All right, well, on behalf of Sustainability with Geneva and the Graduate Institute Environment Committee, I thank you all for joining us for this panel, and to all of the panelists, we here in Switzerland stand with you, and be sure that you have all our support and all the efforts that we can extend for you. And we would also like to invite everybody to join us for other events on Sustainability Week later this week. And yes, thank you for joining, and thank you to all of the panelists for the amazing words and the amazing experiences that you've shared with us.